Okay, talk today is Einstein has caused our economic collapse. Einstein has been very influential in physics. Now that influence has spread to economics, leading people in economics to get as messed up as much as the people in physics. This has led to our economic collapse, as Lee Spolling will explain. The main site I will be dealing with is how bad science led to the economic crisis. That's the title of the site. That's the address of it. Right. It is unfair to blame Einstein totally for the economic collapse. He is just one of the contributing factors. However, we live in a crazy world where Einstein talking nonsense has had a profound effect on our society, i.e. by creating lots of people that have been educated to be stupid and to believe nonsense. So the nonsense is what Einstein's been telling them to believe. We have an education system teaching Einstein stuff, and it's nonsense. So people are educated to be stupid. If we go now to the site, there's my videos. This is the person going to give the little talk, Lee Spolling. And we go down here. The title of the site: How Bad Science Has Led to the Economic Crisis. We're in a worldwide economic crisis, and who do we blame? Guess who? Einstein's were deduced by physics because it made their claims seem to be more scientific. So physics has had an influence on people. Economists have decided to base their beliefs upon physics, and physics has been influenced by Einstein. Right. The economist belief, their belief was in a concept of equilibrium in which it would be impossible to profit from trading around a circle of goods or a circle of currencies without actually producing anything. Of course that is possible, and that did happen, and that's because you're never really at equilibrium. So what they believed seemed to be incorrect. Right. Lee Spolling, who's going to give the talk, attended Harvard University for graduate school, receiving a PhD in theoretical physics in 1979. He held postdoctoral positions at the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton and so forth. And in September 2001 he moved to Canada to be a founding member of the Permian Institute for Theoretical Physics, where he has been ever since, according to this. Right, he's going to give us a little talk. I can reduce it a bit because it seems to be a bit big. There we go. Let's get started. Oh, I could put the sound up probably. There we go.
Mike Brown, who had been the first CFO of Microsoft, Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft and Treasurer of Microsoft. He came to Toronto in 2007 and took my wife and I out to dinner and said he's trying to put together a research group to work on economics, and he would like me to be involved. And I said, I don't know anything about economics. And he said, that's okay, because nobody does. And
nobody knows anything about economics. Right. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Where do we go? One of my links here. Let me explain. Einstein didn't know what he was talking about. Go back. So also my other link here. Einstein drags people into political mess. So I've been dealing with the influence of Einstein. Einstein doesn't know what he's talking about. He's dragging people into a political mess. He's got all this big influence on society, and so him not knowing what he's talking about, well, that's influenced people. And here we go, this site here, our education site, re-imaging Einstein for students and teachers. And this is a course on Einstein. The Einstein Revolution team in 2015. In the Einstein Revolution, that's the course, we examine Einstein as a thread that ties together an understanding on many aspects of the 20th century, from history and technology to visual arts, film and beyond. No scientist has generated as much controversy and interest as Einstein. His theories changed our understanding of the nature of atoms, time, light and space. However, his theories had reached far beyond the scientific, extending into the wider society. And so we've got him, his ideas spreading out, and as we got into this little talk here, it's now the influence on physics on the economists, and they're the ones messing up our society. Einstein's influence on physics, and now it's spreading to economics. And according to this site, we're still on the Einstein Revolution. Together we will investigate Einstein's views and his history, the historical era into which he stepped, and that era's response to him, the technology that intrigued him, and that which he enabled, the art that moved him, and that which he inspired. So he's inspired art, and of course his groundbreaking insight into the science of physics. Our ambitious aim is to do all of this in a way that doesn't require pre-existing knowledge beyond algebra. Right, so we are talking influence here. He's inspired art and so forth. So he's just a big icon and influence on modern society. The other links will come later. So here we go back to him again. He's talking about physics having a bad effect on economics, and physics has been influenced by Einstein, so it's all tied in together. I think I should show his book first. So not that one, Time is Reborn. This is the book by Lee Spolin, Time Reborn, from a crisis in physics to the future of the universe. So really, to some extent, this is only tying into his ideas already about time and relativity and so forth from physics. So go back to what he's talking about again, just pick it up again from the beginning.
2007, because of the 2008 economic crisis, Mike Brown, who had been the first CFO of Microsoft, Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft and Treasurer of Microsoft, he came to Toronto in 2007 and took my wife and I out to dinner and said he's trying to put together a research group to work on economics, and he would like me to be involved. And I said, I don't know anything about economics. And he said, that's okay, because nobody does, and the whole system is...
Well, nobody knows anything about economics. That's Einstein's influence, I think, to quite some extent. And nobody understands physics anymore because they've totally messed it up. Einstein didn't understand what he was talking about. He's influenced physics people to be that way, and now I think he's influenced economic people to be like that way.
He said, that's okay, because nobody does, and the whole system is about to collapse. He said the balance sheets of all the big investment banks, it's like they have cancer, they're full of holes.
That's like physics, full of holes. Physics is now full of holes because of what Einstein did. His influence has made a mess of physics, and economics is now a mess. Influence on it, full of holes.
It's like they have cancer, they're full of holes.
Cancer, that's the influence of Einstein. What's the influence of Einstein? It's like a cancer. It's affected physics, and now it spreads out to affect economics.
cancer. They're full of holes.
Full of holes.
I remember being very struck by this, because this was before anybody was talking about this. And so I started to meet with a group of people that he was pulling together to understand what was going to happen and to understand if there was any way to save the situation. It was a very ambitious thing, and of course we failed. But along the way I was motivated as a kind of public service to get interested in economics. And what I found, economics in a way is very easy for a physicist to understand, because it's very
easy for a physicist to understand. For a physicist influenced by Einstein, are going to go over to economics and find economics influenced by Einstein as well. So it's easy for them to understand. It's a nonsense. Well, from my point of view, yeah, easy because it's nonsense. It's the same sort of nonsense again.
Economics in a way is very easy for a physicist to understand, because it's very mathematical. And the math...
Right, the mathematical. I've gone into the mathematical. Mathematical nonsense. I've gone into the maths. This is the type of mathematical nonsense that people who believe in Einstein use. So when he's talking about physicists influenced by the nonsense of Einstein, they believe in a sort of mathematical nonsense. So they go over to economics and find Einstein's had the same influence over there, and it's easy to understand for them because they're going by the same sort of mathematical nonsense. So getting back again, pick that up again.
Economics in a way is very easy for a physicist to understand, because it's very mathematical. And the mathematical models that they use are very clean. They're based on assumptions and hypotheses. And you can
Based on assumption and hypotheses, that sort of thing that Einstein introduced into physics. So economics is the same sort of thing.
assumptions and hypotheses, and you can study them. And then as I studied it, I began to understand some for myself and more from just reading around, because the faults with the standard economic models, with the standard models of finance, are well known. They've been in the literature for decades and decades.
So there's faults with the mathematical models they're using, the maths they're using. It's been well known. And if you go back to physics, we've still got the faults in the maths they're using. It's well known. If you go to this book, beginning here. There's this book here, if I can wise it up bigger. Various people in the physics community are aware of the mathematical faults, like this person, Professor O'Hanian, and he's written this book on Einstein's mistakes. So they are aware to some extent of the maths mistakes. They're just not totally accepting all the mistakes. They're still going along with some of the mistakes. So they are aware to some extent of the maths being messed up.
With the standard economic models, with the standard models of finance, are well known. They've been in the literature for decades and decades. So let me give some examples. The standard model of economics is called the neoclassical model. And it is
The neoclassical model, and it's probably, the classical model is probably Einstein, not the classical model is probably Newton, and then you update that model, the new model, and it's probably the one that's been influenced by Einstein. So you bring in all this Einstein stuff to mess it up. The neoclassical model, Einstein messed up model of classical physics.
assumes that markets are systems where trading happens between consumers and firms, and there's certain simple models of how that goes on. And the idea is that these come to equilibrium. Equilibrium not in the physical sense, but in a special economic sense, in which you reach a point at which the prices are fixed, such that market forces fix the prices such that you maximize the happiness of the consumers and maximize the profits of the firms. And in so-called equilibrium, nobody can become happier or more profitable without somebody else becoming less happy or less profitable. And the ideology behind this not behind the mathematics, because mathematics doesn't have an ideology, but behind the arguments that were made. And
he said mathematics does not have an ideology. I sort of I disagree with that. I think Einstein has had an influence. We go back to this one, mathematical nonsense as used by Einstein's relativity. So if we go to that, this one, mathematical nonsense is used by Einstein relativity. I think maths does have a sort of ideology now in it, as used by physicists, and they're going by the influence of Einstein. It's nonsense ideology of mathematics they're going by. So he's not. I don't think he's correct there.
because mathematics doesn't have an ideology, but behind the arguments that were made and still are made from this model is that markets don't need regulation because they have these natural equilibria where everybody benefits to the maximum possible. And if you're in equilibrium, you can't do better. Now, there's a fault with this, and it's an obvious fault. It's been known since the 1970s from some theorems proved by some economists, including some of the founders of this field of mathematical economics, which is that there's not one equilibrium, there are many equilibria. In fact, there's a vast number of equilibria. And so, which equilibria, even assuming that this is a decent model of the economy, which is not clear, but even assuming it's a good model, which equilibria you're in depends on the past history, depends on regulation, depends on politics, depends on taste, depends on changing taste, changing preferences. And so history matters, and what's called path dependence matters. This takes us outside of the neoclassical model of economics, but it doesn't take us outside of economics because some wiser economists, for example, Brian Arthur, had for years been developing models and theories of path-dependent economy, where the history does matter. People from the area of complex systems like Stu Kaufman and Per Bach have been developing models of markets where the history matters, where there's not a single equilibrium, where there are many equilibria, and where change is paramount. Another symptom of this is the idea that arbitrage isn't, I mean, in these neoclassical models, when you go to equilibrium, arbitrage is impossible. Arbitrage is making a profit from trading around a circle of goods or a circle of currencies without actually producing anything. And in equilibrium, that's supposed to be impossible, but lots of firms and investment banks have made fortunes off of currency trading. So why is that? Turns out because you're never really at equilibrium. So why is the notion of equilibrium so powerful? I think part of the answer is this idea of physics envy, that economists thought that what they were doing was more scientific, hence more correct, if it looked like physics.
So that's the influence of physics. Economists thought if they're doing something which looks more like physics, then it's being more scientific. And of course Einstein has influenced physics. So they're then incorporating Einstein stuff when they're going to do that.
Envy, that economists thought that what they were doing was more scientific, hence more correct, if it looked like physics. And physics had this timeless picture in which what really mattered, as we were saying before.
Physics had this timeless picture, and I think it's tying into his book here. He's written Time Reborn by Lee Sponin, and he talks about time as influenced by Einstein. So I think I'll divert into talking about this a bit. This is from Lee Sponin's book. When I was 9 years old, my father bought a copy of Lincoln Barnett's The Universe and Dr. Einstein home to our apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side, and we puzzled over its explanation of relativity theory. Even now, I can recall the diagrams of speeding trains and bent starlight, so this seems to be the first influence of Einstein on Lee Sponin. Even now, I can recall the diagrams of speeding trains and bent starlight. This was my first exposure to physics. And the first exposure to Einstein. Then, around age 16, I read Einstein's first paper on general relativity while riding the subway downtown to visit my rock band member cousin. Einstein's seminal papers were available then, as they are now, in a cheap paperback edition. seduced into physics by his writings, Einstein's writings, when I was fortunately exposed to, before I had the chance to open a textbook, I had no idea that I'd encountered the best example of how to express in clear ideas the essence of nature. It was something like being weaned off infant formula in a 5-star French restaurant, so that later you would have to be coerced, kicking and screaming, into eating your Cheerios and peanut butter and jelly. So what we're talking about is an influence by Einstein on Spaulding from his reading of Einstein. Later I discovered that there's very little in physics to match the conceptual clarity and elegance of Einstein's theories. Not quantum mechanics, not contemporary quantum field theory, not even Newtonian mechanics, whose textbook presentations are often logical messes. So he's saying the physics textbooks are a logical mess. And next he says about them, undermined by confused and circular definitions of basic concepts such as mass and force. So he's saying textbooks are messed up here. But because I began with Einstein, his work became my scientific standard, and his theories of relativity became my touchstones. Their principles as sacred as any text could be to one schooled in the skepticism of science. So he's influenced by Einstein's writings, and he's looking at the textbooks and saying the textbooks are messed up. But if you actually go into these textbooks, they're influenced by Einstein as well. So he's going back to Einstein's papers, that's influencing him, but the textbooks themselves are influenced by Einstein. So you got both things. That's the contribution of Einstein, messed up physics. But this person, I think, is an Einstein fan, so he doesn't want to recognise how big a mess Einstein has made of things. He's just looking at how wonderful Einstein is. As it happens, Einstein's theories of relativity are the strongest arguments we have for time being an illusion, masking the truer, timeless universe. So, the influence of Einstein is our understanding of time, and time is now so an illusion. It's what we call timeless. Back when I believed that time is an illusion, my main reasons had to do with relativity theory, so he was influenced by Einstein for time to believe that time is an illusion. Einstein invented two theories of relativity. The first, special relativity, is a theory about a world in which gravity does not exist. It was presented in two of the papers Einstein published in his miracle year of 1905. General relativity, invented over the next decade, incorporates gravity. Einstein's two theories of relativity are, at their most basic, theories of time, or better, timelessness. So Einstein is introducing this idea of timelessness. So Einstein's changing what we mean by time, and we're getting this idea of what we call timelessness. They have an undeserved reputation for being difficult. I find them beautifully simple and easy to explain. So he's thinking this idea of Einstein on time and timelessness, it makes sense to him, but to me, it's just nonsense. It's true that relativity seems at first counterintuitive. Well, not only is it counterintuitive, but it is nonsense. Because it replaces a wrong intuition. He's kind of like saying how we were dealing with time before Einstein was wrong by a deeper intuition that experiment tells us is closer to the truth. So the correct way of dealing with time before Einstein, he thinks is wrong, and he thinks that the correct way of dealing with time is as by Einstein. So he's been deeply influenced by Einstein, and he's got things all messed up. To learn relativity is to experience a transition from one way of mentally organising the world to another. So that's correct. So if you understand the world in one way with time and so forth, you suddenly have to go to Einstein and you find you've got to do things differently. So this mentally organising the world to another way of doing things, another way of doing things is Einstein's way of doing it, and that is totally messed up. So if you go to your education system, you go in there with your probably a Newtonian way of looking at things, and you're coming out totally messed up way of thinking about things. Your mental organisation has been messed up. That's if the education system has, they think, been successful. Education is a form of brainwashing, and you've come out of it believing nonsense. You have to give up certain unconscious assumptions about time, but after that the main ideas follow logically. So that's what's happening. Einstein, you go in to university for physics, you get educated in his way of doing about it, and Lee Spolin thinks that is good, but I say it's nonsense. You're just being educated to nonsense. So Lee Spolin is an example of one of these people being taught nonsense and believing it. Time is an illusion. This is the sort of thing that they will subject you to. This is how they talk about time as an illusion now.
But no matter how accurate
Einstein's influence.
time remains a mystery. Clocks can tell us what time it is, but they haven't been able to tell us what time itself is. What is it we're actually measuring? He discovered that time could run at different rates.
Right.
There isn't time in the sense of a universal tick-tock. There were times.
Einstein came to this shocking revelation by uncovering a hidden connection between space and time. What Einstein figured out is that there's a profound link between motion through space and the passage of time. Roughly speaking, the more you have of one, the less you have of the other.
It's mind-blowing that you and I will not agree on measurements of time. Isn't time separate from us, right? Why should my measurement of time depend on how I am moving or how you're moving? That doesn't make any sense.
Time itself is running more slowly for the person who's moving. That's amazing. No one before Einstein ever imagined that sort of thing would happen.
That was uniquely Einstein.
So why don't we ever see this in everyday life? Well, at the slow speeds we move here on Earth, motion's impact on time is so tiny, we don't experience it. But the effect is real and can be measured.
Right, so first of all, on your everyday experiences of time, you don't experience time in the way Einstein talks about it, and so they have to explain that, and they come up with this idea that, well, even though you don't experience time in the way Einstein's talking about it, it does appear when you do experiments. And if we go back to here, there we go. Einstein is just talking nonsense, is a valid conclusion. So if you look in the physics as to what Einstein's talking about, my sort of conclusion, he's just talking nonsense. But those people, they have looked at it and they've deluded themselves that it is not, it ties into physics experiments, so they've totally deluded themselves. If I go back to the basic one I'm talking about here, the lie on which Einstein's relativity is built. So they're making a false claim about an experiments, and they're building upon that. The lie on which Einstein's relativity is built. So this idea which they're talking about, time, which comes from Einstein, that's what they now call is timelessness. We go back to the talk in a minute. So we go in here. This is one of the people influenced by Einstein, and surprising as it may, this is Albert Einstein, The Fabric of Time, at this website, and this is what he thinks about it. Surprising as it may be to most non-physicists, most non-scientists, and even to some scientists, Albert Einstein concluded in his later years that the past, present and future all exist simultaneously. In 1952, in his book Relativity, in discussing Minkowski's space-world interpretation of his theory of relativity, Einstein writes, Since there exists in this four-dimensional structure, space-time, no longer any sections which represent now, quotation marks now, this moment in time, objectively, the concepts of happening and becoming are indeed not completely suspended, but yet complicated. It appears therefore more natural to think of physical reality as a four-dimensional existence instead of, as hitherto, the evolution of a three-dimensional existence. Right. Einstein's belief in an undivided, solid reality was clear to him, so much so that he completely rejected the separation we experience as the moment of now. He believed there is no true division between past and future. There is rather a single existence. His most descriptive testimony to this faith came when his lifelong friend Biso died. Einstein wrote a letter to Biso's family saying that although Biso had preceded him in death, it was of no consequences. For us physicists believe the separation between past, present and future is only illusion, although a convincing one. And that's sort of Einstein's idea, time is an illusion, and it's that idea of what we call timelessness. Time is now an illusion. So we go back now to Lee Spolling, pick it up.
And physics had this timeless
Einstein
picture in which what really mattered, as we were saying before, is the whole history of the system. And in physics there's also a big notion of coming to equilibrium, which is, though, however, it's important to say, is a different notion of equilibrium. And somehow people in economics got seduced into this model, which again works in the small...
So people in economics are being influenced by this model of timeless, which is coming from Einstein.
Notion of equilibrium. And somehow people in economics got seduced into this model, which again works in the small. If you have a small little corner of the economy, a small market, it may work for a while to characterize approximately what's going on. Arbitrage is not always there. It's not always, arbitrage opportunities do get eaten up. There are market forces which do push you towards equilibria. There's some truth in it. But the whole thing is a disaster, if I can say that as an outsider.
The whole thing is a disaster. So what we're talking about is his influence from physics of timelessness, and the whole thing in economics is a disaster from it. Pick it up again. So Einstein's ideal of timeless, influence in economics, and you end up with a disaster.
Get eaten up. There are market forces which do push you towards equilibria. There's some truth in it. But the whole thing is a disaster, if I can say that as an outsider. And it led, indirectly, it wasn't the only reason why regulations were lifted on markets and trading through the decades, but when people were making arguments to Congress, to the President's office, that the economy would be better off without regulation, this was the, quote, scientific rationale for it, and led to the very unstable situation of the last economic crisis.
Led to the unstable economic instability. So we've got Einstein's influence now, this idea of timeless, it goes to economics, and it creates a disaster, creates instability.
To the very unstable situation of the last economic crisis, and indeed there's still a very dangerous and unstable situation in the world
still dangerous.
Because, well, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to pontificate about the problems in the economy. But one could see how the idea of timelessness gave false comfort to an unsuccessful...
So the idea of timeless, which is coming from Einstein, gave false comfort.
The idea of timelessness gave false comfort to an unsuccessful scientific theory in the realm of economy.
Unsuccessful scientific theory.
Timelessness gave false comfort to an unsuccessful scientific theory in the realm of economy, of economics.
the end. So that's Einstein's influence. You got this idea of timeless. Time is an illusion according to Einstein, and that has influenced economy. They've messed up everything in economics because they've been influenced now by Einstein. If we go back, here we go. Time is an illusion. For us, physicists believe the separation between past, present and future is only an illusion, although a convincing one. So Einstein's influence about what he believes about time has messed up our economy. That's how big he is. It says here, no scientist, Einstein, has generated as much controversy and interest as Einstein. His theories changed our understanding of the nature of atoms, time, light and space. However, his theories had to reach far beyond the scientific, extending into the wider society. So his influence has extended out into economics, and that influence has caused the people in economics to go by what he's talking about, and they make it a big mess. Einstein has been very influential in physics, and that influence has spread to economics, leading to the mess there as well. That's the end. Thank you.